Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our webinar session today. My name is Alison. I'm Head of Stakeholder Relations here at LanguageCert, and I'll be introducing and handing over to Cathy Jones, our speaker today, in just a minute. For those of you a bit less familiar with LanguageCert, we are a leading global provider of English language assessments for individuals wanting to evidence their proficiency skills for study, work, or migration purposes. And it is in the English language proficiency within the academic domain that is the focus of today's session. LanguageCert is very much an active member and participant in the global language assessment and research communities around the world. And it's great to see so many people join us today from, I think, over 30 countries, even from, I think, as far away as Australia. So if you're from Australia, I hope you're having a good evening, and thanks for staying up to be with us. Cathy's talk will take about 45 minutes. And then we'll have some questions time at the end for any questions that you might have. And if you have any questions, then the screen there, you'll see the Q&A button. So throughout the presentation, feel free to pop your question in there, and then we'll take those at the end of the session. Okay, I think that's enough from me from now. So I'll join later on in the presentation, and now handing over to Catherine.
Thank you, Alison, and yes, warm welcome to everybody who's joined today. So I'm Catherine, and I'm working on the development of LanguageCert Academic. I've been working in assessment for over 20 years now, which is a scary thought. And it sounds like a cliche. People often say they're passionate about things, but over the course of this 20 years, I think I can truly say I am actually, a bit sadly, passionate about assessment. I've been thinking a lot about the future of assessment recently and the role that assessment will play in the changing educational landscape. And that's what we're talking about today in the title. As a test developer, I've become really interested in the analogy of early televisions being designed to look like wooden pieces of furniture. This is a really modern invention, the television, looking like a Victorian cabinet. What's the assessment equivalent of this? I've been asking myself. Some of the familiar icons and templates, maybe, like the little icon of a telephone, pencil, or a notepad. But how about when it comes to English language skills and proficiencies? I'm thinking, I don't know how to avoid designing the television in the cabinet. I don't want to, but I wonder if that's a natural thing. And it's an interesting thought, to hold that thought while I'm talking. I'm also intrigued by the role that human intelligence is going to play alongside its artificial variety, and the skills and proficiencies that we're all going to need to access opportunities and to communicate in this new age. What kind of value are we going to place on human interaction? And when we first brought home a Google Home, one of those home devices, my then 8-year-old daughter realized we were asking it questions. And she went over to it and she said, was it lonely in the shop, Google? And that just blew me away because she was imagining it was a person. But now, age 14, so, you know, relatively short space of time, she's just yapping at it abruptly, like we all do. Is that yappy, bossy tone, is it always appropriate? How are those kind of methods of communication going to become interlinked? Is it ever going to be appropriate to talk to a human in the way that we talk to a Google Home? They're questions that I think are really interesting as a test developer. Similarly, which communicative English language skills do we think may become obsolete? Which ones are going to become essential? Those the same as the ones that are essential today. And as test developers, we're naturally always working at least 2 years ahead of time. A test needs to be valid. It can't be a test of, say, a randomly predicted future. So For example, I'm just getting in my time machine for my history project, or it can't be a test of an obsolete past. So I have to spend quite a bit of my time fishing out references to things like DVDs that learners in 2 years' time, I mean, is anyone going to know what a DVD is? So in this talk, I'm going to speak a little bit about how, as test developers, we navigate this balance and foster academic English skills in a world that is continuously evolving, developing, and changing. And AI is super exciting and everything, but I think it's important to remember that the world has always been continuously evolving, developing, and changing. The advent of AI, generative AI is a huge sort of milestone in teaching, learning, and assessment, but arguably there have been others in the past, and there will be more to come. This isn't a kind of reactive response to what's going on at the moment. It's within the context of ongoing and continuous change. And in this context, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how what I'm saying is embedded in the test that I've been working on developing, which is LanguageCert Academic. So you're not seeing double. This was the title slide when you're working away in PowerPoint that your friendly generative AI tool says, oh, would you like to design it like this? So it had the title, as I had it before here, looking like that, nice. And then it said, how about presenting it like this? And this is the suggested title page, not for any other purpose than I thought vaguely interesting, apart from the sort of awful font sizing and spacing, which I don't think is as good as the way I had it. What about these old-fashioned books? And what about these strange futuristic floating letters? In a way, it's tried to come up with this kind of collision that we've got at the moment that we're facing as test developers in how we do this and how we harness these skills and how we don't end up with a kind of, to me, this is a bit of a, is it a mishmash or is it accurate? I just leave it with you to think about. So in terms of an overview then, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about how I think the educational landscape is changing. Like Alison said, I've only got 45 minutes. So it's going to be almost, a very quick kind of like look through. Then thinking about what English language skills students need to thrive in higher education, the English skills they need now, and as I've kind of intimated in my introduction, the English language skills they're going to need in the future. I'm then going to give some examples from the test I've been working on, the LanguageCert Academic. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, this is a multi-level 4-skill test designed for higher education admissions. And I'm also just going to touch on how I think that preparation for tests of this kind, they're designed well and correctly, can constitute a linguistic foundation for future success. And by that, I mean be more than a hurdle to get you to the next point in your education. I need that English to get there, boom, done it, gone. I would like to think that in the work that we do as responsible test developers, that we can add something more, a more multidimensional opportunity for learners to develop skills that are going to enable them to survive, thrive, and flourish in the next stage of their journey. So, okay, I'm 49, and these are things that I have used and experienced 30 years ago now when I was at university. Everybody who's old, according to my kids, would say this, but it doesn't actually feel like that long ago. These are visual things, but there was also, remember, the what and how I was learning too. So I've got here the blackboards, not that long ago, the overhead projector, sitting like that in an exam hall, obviously books, index cards to find books. I worked in Cambridge University Library and I used to be given a slip of paper and then I had to run and fetch the book, bring the book back. So different to how we are now. The telephone and files. And in the middle there's like a bonus prize, if anybody knows what this is. But I had to include it. It's called a sharp font writer. And I felt so lucky. My mum bought that for me when I was an undergraduate. And I wrote my dissertation, which was in French and History of Art, on a screen of which 2 or 3 lines max were ever visible. That little thing in the middle there is actually a screen, and it printed out the back. That was high tech. And that was how I was learning. So how on earth I managed to embed kind of cohesion and coherence and organizational structure when I could only see 3 lines at a time is quite an interesting thought. But yeah, so the visual things are these. So it's just a sort of almost superficial flavor of how fast things move when they are moving. But as I said, there's also the what and how we're learning as well. When my mother learned French at A-level, she could translate works by Molière, Rabelais. She couldn't order a beer or tell a new friend about her interests. I don't know, you know, that might say more about my mum, but you get the point. That the what and how you learn is evolving. So by contrast, when I did French and History of Art at university, I could describe the role of a female impressionist. I could also order a coffee, something mum couldn't do in French, and I could chat to friends. But today, I can't really help a friend who's relocated to take up an issue they're having with their internet provider. I seriously don't have the vocabulary at hand to be able to do that. And sort of my French technical vocabulary kind of ends around Minitel, which was like this sort of early 90s equivalent of CFAX for anyone who's familiar with that. I know we've got lots of teachers and teaching professionals joining today, which is fabulous. And I know that when I'm speaking to you, if you've ever tried to design or operate an internal test, you'll be aware of the complexities and the pitfalls in test development. It's complex and time consuming, and it absolutely has to take account of a whole range of considerations, from the content, what you're going to test, how you're going to test it, how it's going to be representative of the real world, scoring, marking, security, accreditation, recognition, validation, research, results verification, test security. There are endless things to take into account. So I'm trying to give you a context which shows, yeah, things are moving really quickly. What we learn and how we learn it is changing quickly. By definition, I need to work slightly ahead of time. I'm a test developer. I'm setting the scene for what are the skills that students are going to need to survive and thrive in a higher education landscape. So I can go back to an analogy that I often use, and it's one that compares a qualification to a doorway. You can imagine that doorway to be whatever you like. And I've used that because I often hear it said, qualifications open doors. They open doors for you in the sense that candidates who take high stakes exams are seeking access to life-changing opportunities like university admission or migrating for work. And in the same way that a doorway provides access to a new, different room or space, a qualification can provide access to higher education, new career opportunities, to experiences, and to communities. And it's, you know, really true that assessment can have a transformative impact on the life chances of individuals. And as a responsible test developer, I have an ethical and moral responsibility to make sure that this powerful gateway to these wonderful things is fit for purpose, valid, reliable, and fit for purpose. So if you take the sort of metaphor of this doorway, it's almost like checking it to make sure the door's well oiled. It hasn't got squeaky hinges. It's a good fit. It's got minimal shrinkage over time. It hasn't expanded. It doesn't jam shut. It's well kept. It's in keeping with its surroundings. If you apply that analogy to qualification development, It's those things I'm saying. The qualification needs to be fit for purpose. It needs to be a valid and reliable indicator of whatever it is that that candidate is being assessed in. It needs to test what it purports to test reliably and consistently over time. So a faulty door that doesn't fit properly or function exactly as it should is like a qualification which is incomplete, outdated, or irrelevant. So it'll lead to frustration, disappointment, and thwarted potential. So what are the consequences if, as test developers, we get our doorway wrong? We have a squeaky hinge. So we have a test that measures incorrectly or inconsistently, or is at the wrong level, or tests the wrong things in an inappropriate balance. What are the issues for the international students who are admitted, taken their test, and they've got inadequate English skills? So there are a complex sequence of issues that impact students, teaching staff, stakeholders. So academic struggles and underperformance. If you can't access the language that you're being taught in, it makes everything tremendously difficult. Social isolation. So it's really hard to engage with your peers if you can't communicate with them in the way at the level that you want to be able to do. This can lead to mental health issues, frustration, stress, anxiety, depression, which has an impact on teaching, creating extra work, extra stress for academic and university staff, as well as the, horrible stress for the students themselves. And yeah, of course, it is possible to address some of these issues retrospectively by introducing some language support programs and making universities have really good proactive efforts to get students up to the right level, but they require time, resources. So really important to get it right, to get the doorway exactly as we want it. This just shows you the LanguageCert Academic test and the LanguageCert General test alongside the portfolio of other LanguageCert English qualifications. But those considerations and those consequences are what we took on when we started developing the LanguageCert Academic qualification and its sister, the LanguageCert General qualification, which is the same for a general context. I think it's true to say that no quality test is static. As I said in the introduction, the world is evolving continually and testing must evolve alongside as part of that world. So no quality test is static. And as an exam board, as test developers, we need to make sure that we are responding dynamically to changing market expectations, changing stakeholder requirements. LanguageCert had feedback from test takers, government agencies, and educational institutions, all informing the rationale for introducing a LanguageCert academic test to extend our portfolio to include a test of academic English and to include a multi-level test for academic English. So those considerations and how we've gone about that is going to be a focus for what I'm talking about now. LanguageCert Academic, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, I'll just quickly summarise its key features. It's a multi-level English test covering those CFR levels we think are most relevant to recognising institutions. So spanning B1, CFR level B1 up to C2. Has a general academic focus for all 4 skills. I'm going to talk a bit more about what I mean by general academic in the slides that follow. It needs to have high levels of predictive validity. The test is testing aptitude, learners' ability to apply their language once they are at university. It's not testing knowledge of the academic domain, what happens at university now. We can't test that knowledge. These candidates aren't necessarily at university yet, but we are testing their aptitude to be able to survive and hopefully flourish in that environment. The test is built on a bed of underpinning research and validation, and I have a slide to just show you the program of research that we have undertaken. It has meaningful and user-friendly results reporting, secure, reliable and accessible test delivery, and it's accompanied by a wide range of preparation materials. This slide I've put together represents the kind of the core, the kind of fundamental middle bit of what I do and what we've done in developing this test. If you look at those roundels there, right in the middle is what we call our test construct. What do test takers need to do in the target language use domains? What are we checking their level of English proficiency to be able to do? Okay, that's the absolute core, and around that test construct sits at the heart of all of the things that all our associated activities that we build from that. We wrap the tests around that. Then we've got preparation and practice materials wrapped around the tests, testing the same things that are in the skills that relate to the same elements of the test construct. Wrapped around that, we have our research and validation program to ensure that the products that we're making available to students are doing what we want them to do in the short term, in the long term. And everything is sitting in the real world. So a test scenario can only ever be an abstraction of what happens in the real world, but we want to make sure that we get those cognitive processes in the context of this test of English language skills and abilities to simulate as far as possible what's going to happen in the real world, to be able to draw conclusions about how our candidates may perform when they are at university. Okay, so if you think about that yellow dot, it's critical, it's really important. And there are lots of different ways that you can define what our test, what a test construct is. For the purposes of developing LanguageCert Academic, we have to take into account who the test-taking population are. Okay, so these guys here, they want to study in higher education in an English-speaking context. They're 17 years and above, and they're non-native speakers of English. Okay, what do we want them to be able to do when they get to university? What does their English need to be able to handle? We want them to be able to handle academic rigor. We want them to be able to participate in a diverse and inclusive community. And we want them to be happy, healthy, proactive participants in their overall university experience. Okay. There are so many different elements that would go into making up being able to handle academic rigor. There are so many different traits that we could sample in a test to see whether or not we think a candidate has the right level of English to be able to handle academic rigor. And I stress that this list is just an example, it's just a flavour of the kind of thing that we think we're thinking at the moment. So, you know, that we need to have the right level of English to be able to read academic articles, to be in a lecture and understand what's going on, to be able to use research tools, whatever shape or size, to take part in discussions, to give presentations, write a report, importantly, to make friends, not to be my mum who can translate Molière but can't go and order a beer, to be able to access services, accommodation services, register with a nurse, register with the university doctor, communicate with university staff, and importantly, to think critically. And as I'm going to explain as part of this presentation, working 2 years ahead, there's also thinking about different time frames. So you've got now, medium term, and you've got long term. this test construct here can't be based on a predicted future. Can't sort of test, I think that by the end of, 2027, we're going to have augmented reality headsets and we're going to be able to time hop around. And I'm going to include references to that kind of future in the test. No, I can't. That's obviously a nonsense. And it's the same, you can't really test, can't look back for any answers either. There's looking at what's going on now. And I'm going to talk you through some of those considerations. And what I find particularly interesting and kind of motivational as a test developer is that I think that there is the capacity in doing this thinking, in unpacking the test construct and developing the tests to kind of shape a future with a focus on skills that will be most useful. And I'll explain why in the next couple of slides. So I said that academic research is a really important bit of really important element of what we do. It wraps around the tests, it wraps around the practice and preparation materials, and it will continue to do so as an ongoing programme of academic research. It's no good me just going and saying we've made this test and it's perfectly representative of all the academic skills. We need to be absolutely sure that our test is doing what we want it to do. It's doing what it says on the tin. It's built on a bed of wider underpinning assessment research. I always say we're absolutely kind of spoilt in the assessment community for a breadth and depth of existing research. So we're able to kind of take that, look at it, be informed about what works, what doesn't work, to think about trends, directions, what's going on there. At LanguageCert, we also have our own body of assessment research. Based on the portfolio of English qualifications that we were already offering. We're able to look at those and what's working, that's already kind of, in a LanguageCert kind of shape. Let's draw on the best of that. Let's learn from what hasn't worked as well, and let's feed that in. And then putting in place a programme of academic research based on this qualification, LanguageCert Academic, in an ongoing way, so we can integrate all of these three things together, feed back in. The hope is that, or more than a hope, the intention, I should say, is that we're putting back into the pot. So what's learned from the way we've taken in our test development and our academic research in hand feeds back into that wider underpinning bed. So others would be able to, that was interesting what they did there, maybe push it a bit further or learn from what we've done. And I think that's really important in a kind of ethical way that our research is publicly available, not only because it provides evidence of the quality of our assessment materials and calibre of our research to stakeholders, but because it's giving something back to the assessment community. So we've undertaken a significant programme already of academic research, plenty more planned for the future. We have an extensive stakeholder engagement programme, a panel of academic advisors. We host higher education summits to head office in Athens. We have student scholarships available. So we have access to a sort of body of student voice, really important in what we're doing. And of course, we have a team of really experienced item writers, specialist reviewers, and vetters. We've got all that expertise converging on this qualification. So what do we mean by academic English? Just a frivolous cartoon, but it kind of sets the tone for why is it different? Why was there a gap for academic English in what we were offering already? And it is because academic English is different. It's a domain in its own right. The academic domain is different to the general domain. And I just pulled out three kind of essentially quite similar definitions of what academic English is. Type of English you need for reading and understanding your study materials and writing about your subject. Depends on producing the most appropriate style for your purpose and audience. It includes consistency, the right level of formality, expressing ideas precisely, being concise, being objective, words and practice that are not necessarily common or frequently encountered in informal conversation, and circumstances. Really important. That's why we need something different for academic English. And just to give an example, I mean, there are lots of different areas that I could give examples for, but one example is academic vocabulary, the nuanced differences in how we use words in a general domain, how we use words in a general academic domain, and then how we use them in a discipline-specific academic English domain. So if you take the example, say, of underline, in a general domain, you're likely to be asked to underline a title on a document or underline your name on the form. In a general academic English domain, underline is used in a different way to say emphasize. So synonym for emphasize. And then there are ways that you can see that underline would be used in a discipline-specific academic English with discipline-specific vocabulary around it. And it's important for me to emphasize now that LanguageCert Academic as a test sits somewhere between general academic English. We're not testing discipline-specific. This isn't for a specific subject. It sits somewhere between general academic English and general English. You don't want to go and talk like a translation of Molière. You want to be able to go and make friends and survive socially and get on with your practical arrangements. So all of the language in the test is in an academic domain or an academic related domain, but the actual content sits somewhere between general English and general academic English. Domain relevance. What makes the test academic? So 3 simple things: the context, the tasks, and the levels. I said the contexts are going to be academic or academic related, a lecture or a trip to the accommodation office to ask for a change of room. Authentic source materials, articles, journals, reports. Okay. The tasks, what the candidates, the test takers are actually having to do. We've got a carefully selected range of tasks to sample the features of language skills from the target language domain. And assessment criteria written to evaluate performance in those tasks. And the levels, those CFR, that's that CFR range spanning B1 to C2, critical in supporting receiving institutions to decide whether a student will be able to cope with the academic language requirements at university. Easy, right? Context, tasks, levels. The next slide, I just want to go in a little bit more, a little bit deeper to look at what is really in that context and tasks. And this is how I've envisaged it within the confines of my PowerPoint skills, which probably are a bit lacking. So you imagine these kind of big floating concepts. They're sort of drifting around, they're changing in size, but they're there. They can't be ignored. And if you think back to what I said at the start, to be valid, reliable, fit for purpose, we need to be cognizant of these. We need to be aware, what are the high-level shifts going on in the academic domain? So what are the shifts that affect how we define these at a surface, superficial level? Extremely simple. You put some academic context, you put some tasks, you get the right skills, the right tasks, all at the right level. But there are these big things coming into play. They need to be included, okay, in order to be valid, reliable, and in order to be truly to provide a linguistic foundation for success. So based on the programme of stakeholder engagement and ongoing research, I've identified these kind of themes. These are the big balls that have been sort of occupying my mind lately. So you've got digital technology. At a conference where I was on a panel recently, it was described as the roar of AI. And I really like that idea. It's just this thing that has just come. Online learning apps, generative AI, virtual reality, augmented reality, distance learning, collaborative learning, data-driven approaches, learning at analytics, which are gathering data on performance, engagement, lots of ways that digital technology is changing and shifting how we are learning and assessing. Demographics are changing. The international student mobility is different. The increased cultural diversity. Teaching learning methods are changing. So we are aware of more different types of learning, including things like project-based learning, personalized learning, something being enabled a lot more by digital technology, blended learning. We need to promote critical thinking, problem solving, creativity. Those kind of skills are becoming important. Oopsie, sorry, I just skipped on slightly too much there. So we need to be thinking about all of these types of things when we are assessing English language proficiency to flourish in this kind of environment. Okay, so things like preparing for the challenges of the 21st century. It's true to say we're in a really complex, dynamic, interconnected world. Climate change, globalization, development of technology, social justice. There are all sorts of different themes sort of that are coming in to how that academic domain can be defined, okay, to be fit for purpose. I don't think these things can be ignored. And so what does this mean for the test? So think of those things, taking this back now to the test. LanguageCert Academic is an online digital first test. The 4-skill approach gives a clear and flexible path to improving language skills. There is skills integration in the test. For example, there are tasks that involve reading, writing, and speaking, but performance is reported separately by skill to allow targeted preparation and clear results reporting recognised by different government agencies for immigration purposes. All 4 parts of the test are set in an academic domain. All 4 skills are set in an academic domain. They include a range of authentic and crafted resources to assess learners reliably and accurately. The academic domain spans everything from seminar presentations to socializing with friends. Across the test, the focus is on communicative language ability. Speaking, listening, interpersonal communication, these are at the heart of the test. The speaking test is conducted and marked by a human interlocutor, and also marked by a second human examiner who listens to a recording of the speaking test. Writing is always marked by 2 human examiners. Both are marked to distinct assessment criteria, of which task fulfillment, both skills, is the overriding double-weighted criterion. So this means if the information you're giving is regurgitated or memorized or doesn't fit the question, not fulfilling the task, you can't score highly. Listening features a range of audio materials, monologues, dialogues, and a 3-way discussion, replicating real-world listening requirements. These are some areas that we know are challenging for international students now, based on our programme of stakeholder engagement. They find speaking pronunciation difficult, fluency, academic English vocabulary and grammar, getting to grips with academic English vocabulary, listening comprehension in different scenarios, reading comprehension, extended writing, learning styles, cultural nuances and context, idiomatic expressions, humour, social conventions. These are the things that have been highlighted as things that international students are grappling with now. So I'm going to take each one of these and show how we've addressed it in the test format and structure briefly, it was always ambitious to fit this into the time, but I shall do my best. So speaking, pronunciation, and fluency. All the speaking parts in the test are assessed for pronunciation, intonation, and fluency. It's a separate criterion. Speaking part 3, we devote a whole part to candidates reading aloud a passage that they have some time, in exam time, to prepare, to look at. We don't have the passage before. But I think this replicates an important real-world skill, reading something aloud in a seminar situation. But it also is a good vehicle to elevate the importance of clear and natural pronunciation and fluency, and provides valuable opportunity for candidates to rehearse reading aloud. I've included here just an example of the kind of passage, length, topic that we would ask the candidates to have a short time to prepare and then read aloud. Academic English and vocabulary. Saw it with the cartoon, those definitions of academic English, slightly different, nuanced differences in meaning. Some words that are a higher frequency in an academic context, a slightly different meaning. The test includes authentic source materials, a good range of authentic source materials, both audio, visual and written from a range of different sources. The material is in real-world academic contexts, discussions with tutors, lectures, articles, research papers. It includes a variety of academic text types and lengths, all increasing familiarity. So preparing for the test, the more familiar they can become with this kind of language, the better. The better they're going to find, the more they will flourish when they get to university. Reading task, the reading includes 2 tasks which specifically focus on lexicogrammatical knowledge and awareness in an academic context. So in the first task, you're replacing a word in the sentence without changing the meaning. So precision is the word there that's being changed. And then the second part, testing lexicogrammatical knowledge and awareness, candidates replace a number of words from a passage, and they have a choice of 3 with which to replace it. Reading part 2 is another way to build academic English vocabulary and grammar. It's a fairly traditional task type, replacing the missing sentences. But in order to do that, I think this is a really good one to teach and to learn, and then to use in the writing skills those discourse markers that flag how a text is organized, how an argument is structured, how the text sits together. If you have the tool of understanding those discourse markers available to hand, you are much more likely to be able to take on an unfamiliar text. You've got all the building blocks there, the signposts that show you broadly how things are structured. And then, as I said, you can use them in your writing. So across the piece, the tasks are designed to help students come to terms with the styles and conventions of academic English. Listening and speaking in different scenarios. So we've embedded lots of different scenarios, different levels of formality, both formal and informal, and productive and receptive communication skills. So here you've got some examples from a listening test. So students talking to a financial advisor, 2 students prepping something, prepping a presentation, or a tutor talking to a student, a lecturer giving a short presentation. A range of task types to assess that listening. What are the skills that they're going to need to be able to do that's going to help improve their listening, like note-taking, listening for to be able to ascertain the right formality to complete a conversation, understanding the gist of a conversation in a range of different scenarios. And all the materials include a range of accents where English is spoken, including UK, US, Australian, UK regional, South African. We've got a full range of accents in the test. The speaking test includes a really good role play task in which candidates are asked to take part in formal and informal role plays. Sometimes they're classmates, sometimes you're talking to a tutor, sometimes you're friends, sometimes it's a different kind of interaction, both initiating and responding in a role play. But that again is getting test takers used to being in these different scenarios. Reading comprehension, another thing that students find difficult. The whole test, reading test, consists of authentic text types, varying text lengths, different sources, different vocabulary, range of task types, with a different test focus across the different parts, including comprehension, inference, purpose, structure, tone, grammar, and vocabulary. Extended writing. So the test includes 2 task types that are designed to allow candidates to express complex ideas fluently and coherently. In any writing test, you know, obviously when students are at university, they need to be able to write far more extended than 250-word response, which is what we call an extended response in a test-taking domain, because, as I said, it's an abstraction of that real-world skill. But within this, we have used it as a vehicle to promote organisation, coherence, language use, analysis, defining an argument. These are all the skills that you would need to scale up across a 10,000-word piece, but that we can sample practically without making the test, 8 hours long. And time management, of course, is also relevant, and that's also going to be relevant to the students when they're at university. I love this one, learning styles. This is something that we know that students find difficult. So there'll be lots of different things that would affect how they understand different, why international students may find it difficult to adapt to different learning styles due to different sort of factors like cultural differences. So what may be considered appropriate or effective in one culture may not translate well to that of the English-speaking culture to which the candidates applying, for example, sort of questioning, educational background. So, with diverse population of international students, they're coming with a variety of different they've been through a variety of different schooling systems with different styles of teaching, maybe with more rote learning, memorization, teacher-centered instruction, and just that lack of familiarity, adjusting to an environment can be overwhelming, I think. And so what we can do through the content is, these are the tasks that I particularly like, is embed tips and strategies related to learning, revising, presenting, actually in the materials themselves. So an example would be students talking about, in a study group, reviewing an essay each other's written. I like the way that you structured your essay around simple headings, or talking about how they're revising together. And I think this is a really powerful way to enhance students' metacognitive abilities, how they are learning about learning. And I think that is a really powerful way to help prepare students to not just survive, but thrive at university. To include examples of giving and receiving feedback. Again, really important. Peer feedback, teacher feedback. You need to be able to understand feedback as being when you're at university. And there's a whole set of linguistic conventions around giving and receiving feedback that we can embed in this test for an academic purpose. Cultural nuances and context, also something that international students report finding difficult. And, you know, it sort of goes without saying, really, PeopleCert's a global organisation. And I think that, you know, our materials do have a genuinely global flavour. We endeavour to ensure that all the materials are representative of a whole range of global perspectives, different linguistic contexts, and really, really working to promote cross-cultural understanding. Idioms, idiomatic language. So another thing students understandably find difficult. And we at the top end of our speaking and writing assessment, we include use of idiom in the criteria, and we also include idiomatic expressions in reading and listening to encourage test takers in their preparation to get more familiar with it. Humour, it's quite subjective, but you know, and that's another thing that's really, I would like to think that we can include more that is about our humour, whether it's an academic article about humour. There are ways to embed those things so that they're not completely alien to the student who starts at that university. And social conventions. I've already said that one of the listening parts, candidates listen for tone, register and formality in order to complete a conversation appropriately. I'm really aware I'm running out of time, but we're coming towards the end now. So in this bit then, what about skills for the future? So they're the concerns that were raised now. To avoid the kind of television and the cabinet scenario, we also need to be thinking about where this is going. There are so many concerns about academic integrity and use of generative AI. I foresee an increase in the importance of oral assessments, Viva type exams. So we are going to want to see students able to explain, defend, and respond to questions, to things they've thought in real time. And this is something that is embedded in half of the speaking test. So that pronunciation read aloud task is followed with follow-up questions in which the candidate is sharing their thoughts, defending their thoughts with the examiner, the human interlocutor, in a conversational style to really unpack what they've understood about the passage and how they express their views. In the final part of the speaking test, the student is given a kind of visual resource. They give a short presentation. Again, it's followed up with questions that are asking them questions that about what they have said, really promoting the ability to be able to defend what you are thinking. And you can see in relation to concerns about academic integrity, how those oral skills might become a lot more important, as long as with different learning styles and different ways of assessing, kind of, you know, assessment portfolios, an oral presentation is going to be a really important part. So I think the standalone speaking component and what we do with that and the kind of skills we want to promote by assessing them is really important. Critical thinking is another term that we hear flying around a lot, but I think it is really, really important that in light of, you know, the roar of AI, that we are able to encourage our test takers to think critically and to be able to express their thoughts and their opinions on how they may be using that generative AI to generate language and to generate, to sort of research their opinions, but so they're able to think critically about what it is that they're actually being given, where it's come from, what language is being used to create it, and how they might go on to use it in their studies. And I think we are able, critical thinking is not explicitly assessed, it's a test of English language proficiency, but there is absolutely no harm in making sure that lots of the task types include an element of critical thinking as a way to preparing students for what they're going to need to be able to do when they get to university. And I've already mentioned giving, receiving and understanding feedback. If we can embed that as part of our content, more metacognitive type materials and tasks, I think that's a really strong and powerful way to set learners up to succeed. So to kind of summarise, I wanted to just reiterate the benefits of tests like LanguageCert Academic for academic settings. And with this development, we have developed a test which can identify students who do those things at the heart at our test at the heart of our test construct, that they can handle academic rigor, that they can participate, and that they can be healthy, happy, and proactive participants in their university experience. The test will streamline the admissions process, be more accurate, avoid those nasty consequences of admitting students with inadequate levels of English language proficiency. The discrete skills assessment enables universities to be able to set program-specific language requirements and overall really drive up academic success, okay? Promoting human interaction, human intelligence, being able to use artificial intelligence responsibly, ethically. And I think it is possible through a test of English language proficiency to be able to encourage, support and promote all of those things. And I would urge you to take a look at some of the materials that are available on our website so you can get a less rushed romp through how we've done that and get a flavour for how it's happened. And returning to that analogy at the beginning about doors, I'd like to think of assessments actually as kind of master keys, which we can use to unlock, maintain and revisit a whole range of skills and opportunities. Once you've got that language key and you keep it in your bunch, you're able to go to the next door and through to the next door. And I think in that way, you are creating a linguistic foundation for your future success. So I'll end it there if anyone's got any questions.
That's all we have time for, and also most of the questions answered. We are recording the session today, so we will be sending everyone a link to this recording afterwards, and do reach out to Catherine if you have any questions. Her email address is there on the screen. We would love to hear from you. But yeah, thank you again very much for joining our session today, and enjoy the rest of your day.